Welcome all, and thank you for joining us today for the fourth presentation in this Arbinger series, Beyond Bold, Leading in the New Frontier. I'm Sarah McMullen from the Arbinger Institute. It's lovely to have you back. Now, I mentioned yesterday that we had people from 6 of the 7 continents. Just for this series of presentations, we've had registrations from 65 different countries. I made a plea for that 7th continent to be added, and I got a note from Patrick Smith, one of our clients, who works for the National Science Foundation Office of Polar Programs. He volunteered to be the representative from Antarctica. Thank you, Patrick. I will count that as a personal victory. Thank you so much. I'm glad to have you here. And all of you, those who are watching live from all over the world, as well as those who are going to be watching this recorded later. This is going to be a wonderful session with our presenter, Chad Ford. A few reminders before we get started. First, this is simultaneously being broadcast on our YouTube channel. So if you have any issues with Zoom or the technology, hop over to YouTube, search for Arbinger. You'll see it right there at the top of our page. Second, you can adjust your viewing screen. If you're watching on Zoom from your computer, you'll see there's me talking in one video and the PowerPoint in the other. There's a little black line between the two and 2 vertical bars. If you grab those little lines with your mouse and drag them back and forth, you can put those windows in whatever way is the most comfortable for you. If you would take a second, introduce yourself, say where you're from. That'll also give you a chance to see how the chat works. Be sure there's a little blue button on there that says all panelists. If you click that, so it says all panelists and attendees, everyone in the chat will be able to see your comments and see where you're from. Finally, Chad and I will be doing a Q&A conversation following this presentation, where I take some of your questions, both from your registration and that come up, that you'll have that come up for you as Chad gives his presentation today. So as you have those questions, please drop them into the Q&A on this webinar. There's a little button on the bottom that says Q&A. That chat can get going kind of quickly, and so we don't want your questions to get lost there. So click that button when you have your questions come up during the presentation. That's also a way to get in touch with our moderators. Drop them there and we'll be sure to find them. Following this presentation from Chad, he and I will have that Q&A. I'll bring the questions to him, and those we record, and they live separately from this webinar. This we're streaming live. The Q&A we record separately offline, and we share it to our website. That's arbinger.com/webinars. You'll be able to find it there once the conversation is posted. Now I'd like to take a minute. I have the pleasure to introduce Chad Ford. Chad is a senior consultant and facilitator with us at the Arbinger Institute. He's an international conflict mediator. He's a college professor, an executive board member for Peace Players, and the author of the upcoming book, Dangerous Love. That book, he explores Arbinger's work through his unique lens of conflict resolution and peace-building experience. Now, if that is not impressive to you, then you'll listen to Chad talk and know that he has a really unique, expansive, and pretty impressive expertise, and we're very fortunate to have him with us today. Chad is an associate professor for international cultural studies and the director of the McKay Center for International Understanding at BYU Hawaii. His emphasis has been in international cultural peace building and mediation. He's led peace building workshops all over the world, and mediations all over the world as well. It is his area of expertise. And those locations include the Middle East, Africa, Northern Ireland, Cyprus, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. And the stories he can tell you are really remarkable and very inspiring. Chad has a bachelor's degree in history and also a master's from the Institute of Conflict Analysis and Resolution at George Mason University, as well as a JD from Georgetown University School of Law. I'm sure I am missing a few things in your long resume, Chad, but thank you so much. Everybody join me in welcoming from his home in Hawaii, Chad Ford.
Aloha, everyone. You're supposed to say aloha back, but you don't get the chance to do that here on the webinar today. And I just want to say how excited I am to be part of this webinar series with Arbinger. I've been a longtime fan and then worked with Arbinger really since 2005. And it has had a deep, deep impact on my life and my practice as a conflict mediator, as a professor. We do tons of Arbinger work here at BYU Hawaii as well. And I'm really grateful for Arbinger that several years ago I approached them about a book that I wanted to write about my conflict resolution experiences. And because Arbinger had been so foundational in so much of the work that we'd done, and some of it that we had done together with Arbinger, that I wanted to include all of those Arbinger ideas and look at them specifically as they pertain to conflict at home, at work, in the community, and even in a lot of the international work that I did. And that collaboration that I've had with Arbinger over the last couple of years of putting this book together, making sure that we got the Arbinger principles right, but we're also able to expand on that in the work in conflict. I'm just really, really grateful for them and that partnership that they've had with Dangerous Love, and really excited that it's coming out on June 23rd, actually. And so this is my first real talk with the Arbinger tribe, if you will, around Dangerous Love and some of the work there. And so I'm excited to just jump into that. And gonna put our first slide together. And let's see, there it is. So this is an old map from the 1500s. It's a Viking map, actually. And you'll see if you look at this map closely that if you veer to the left from the shore, you see sea monsters everywhere. And this was actually the origin of a term that maybe you've heard before, there be monsters. And I'm really interested in this map. It always fascinates me, not just because I like mythical creatures, but because folks at the time actually believed that they existed, that they believed if they veered from the shores of their homes, that their boats were going to be engulfed by these creatures. And that's been my experience with conflict over the years as well. As in my life as a mediator, in consulting with organizations and working in international conflict, there is just an enormous amount of fear around conflict. And that's been the thing that I've really been exploring in my book, Dangerous Love, and with Arbinger, is how fear impacts our ability to have outward mindset and how it actually sort of provokes inward mindset. And so I want to think about conflict for a minute. I want to give a non-scary definition of conflict. And so here's one that I think shouldn't be too scary. Conflict is our inability to collaboratively problem solve with other people. Think about it for a minute. When things are going smoothly and we're solving problems together, we don't experience conflict the same way. Conflict comes when we can't figure out solutions together. And that, I want to start by telling a story. I actually opened my book with a story, one that was really impactful for me when I was working in the Middle East. I was actually doing a workshop, and that included an Arbinger workshop with a number of nonprofits that were working really throughout the world. But there was this young woman who was representing her nonprofit. Her name was Miriam, or I'm going to call her Miriam for the purposes of this. And she was working in a Middle Eastern country, and she had started a nonprofit that was getting women involved in sports. This was her passion, and she lived in a country where women typically weren't really involved in sports at all. And she had this great idea. She had backing, she had funding, but she'd come to the workshop really frustrated. And that was because there was only one gym in her village. And it was owned by this man named Mahmoud. And Mahmoud would not allow Miriam or any women to use the gym. This made Miriam really frustrated. And as she recounted in the workshop, as we were thinking about seeing people as people, seeing people as objects, collusion, all of that stuff, she was just getting more and more frustrated. And finally, her hand just shoots up and she says, "What if the person that you're working with is evil? What about that?" So I started spending some time with Miriam, and she described her situation, and she talked a little bit about what was going on with Mahmoud and how people in the village weren't taking her nonprofit seriously because they couldn't even use the gym. And then she talked about the things that she had done to try to solve the problem. She'd gone to him, she talked about her dream with him, didn't get a response there. She tried to have other people come, talk to him, didn't get a response there. Then she turned to picketing the gym, calling him a sexist and marching around with signs and things like that. That didn't get her access to the gym. And she was really out of options. And as she sat there in the workshop frustrated, it just didn't seem to her like outward mindset was really going to help here, right? Because the guy, Mahmoud, was so inward. How is that ever going to change? And so the more that we talked with Miriam, the more she talked about just being afraid to even have a conversation with him, to go back. She just didn't know what to do. Everything was shut down for her. And as we began to work through things together, it became clear that Miriam didn't really know Mahmoud very well, that she was struggling with really understanding what his motivations were behind things. And after a while, she said something that I thought was really, really telling. She said, one thing that I can tell you about Mahmoud, and this took a lot of questioning actually, was that Mahmoud's gym, they live in a poor village, and then almost no one can actually afford to go and pay the gym dues or gym fees or whatever. So people are constantly coming to him asking for freebies, asking to be able to come to the gym and use it for free. That also included Miriam. She was one of many, many requests to use the gym for free. And I asked her, how do you think that plays with Mahmoud? Is his family wealthy? No. Do you think that he needs the money and revenue from the gym to be able to feed his family and take care of his family? Yes, he does. Let's consider that for a minute. And a day later, after considering that, she left and went back home with a plan. And I'll talk to you a little bit about her plan later. But I want to start with thinking about what was going on with Miriam and Mahmoud. And so there's two types of conflict. One that I believe in called constructive conflict, that conflict isn't always something negative, right? If you think about conflict, it can transform contention into collaboration. It can balance justice and mercy. It can unlock creativity. It can you can develop inner strength and calm that was good for me. It can strengthen our personal and professional relationships. It can solve deep-rooted problems that need to be solved within communities or organizations. And actually, conflict can create peace. And I call this the cocoon approach because it's an approach that in many ways mimics what happens with a caterpillar, right? A caterpillar is going along, it's eating leaves, it's doing its thing, right? And eventually it decides it's going to be a butterfly, and it goes into a cocoon, and it goes into a chrysalis. And in the chrysalis, it's actually tight, it's actually scary. If you know anything about this at all, the caterpillar actually kind of liquefies. It essentially dies in the process of being in the cocoon. But eventually it emerges from the cocoon. And when it does, it's a butterfly. And it took me a while to actually understand butterflies really aren't just caterpillars with wings. They're a completely different creature. And I think it's a great metaphor for thinking about constructive conflict. It still can be scary. It still can feel constraining. It can feel impossible at times, but there is a possibility, a path to something much, much greater. Well, there's also destructive conflict, and that's the stuff that we're afraid of, right? That's when conflict feels dangerous. Our stories that we say about it feel weak. In other words, there's nothing I can do about it, and self-absorbed. Everything's inward mindset. It's all about me. It feels hopeless. It creates estranged relationships and distance, dysfunctional workplaces, divided communities and nations. And I call it the smog approach because smog is a great metaphor for something that we really can't control. We know it's not good for us. We know breathing it causes all sorts of problems. But any individual trying to eliminate smog in their community, that seems hopeful. I can buy a Prius or what have you, but that's not really going to take care of it. So it all feels external and outside of our control. And most of the time when people are talking to me about destructive conflict, they're talking like Miriam. Everything is external. Everything is out of my control. What if Mahmoud is just a bad or evil person? There's no possibility for constructive conflict there. And I really disagree. And so I want to show you, this is a computer rendition of a brain scan that's actually tracking neural pathways. And this particular individual, his brain scan is someone who is experiencing fear right now. And this may not mean a lot to you until I show you the next slide, but I want you to sort of think about those lines being pathways, right? They're like ruts. They're ways of our brains thinking about particular things And when we experience conflict, our brain jumps into ruts. It jumps into certain ways of thinking that really limit our vision and actually provoke a fear response within us that can be either a fight or flight sort of response. And so this is a brain on conflict, on fear, on destructive conflict, if you will. Now I'm going to compare it to another extreme on the other side here. This is another brain scan, and look at those neural pathways. Look at how they pop, and look how many of them there are. Look how colorful it is, what have you. This is a yogi who practices meditation every day. And this is someone who's profoundly not experiencing fear, but experiencing peace and calm. And look at the difference between the two. When we experience fear, our ability to think and to act in creative, constructive, collaborative ways really diminishes. But when we let go of fear, right, look at our ability to be able to think creatively, to be able to think expansively. It's a tremendous difference. Now, most of us are somewhere between A and B in our lives right now. Maybe a lot of our life is an A right now. But look at that ability for our brains to do incredible things when we're not experiencing fear. And so, how does mindset and conflict connect to each other? How we see conflict, I'm talking about conflict in general, and how we see the people we are in conflict with often will determine our mindset, right? We can see the people and the conflict in a smog way, in an inward way, or we can see them in a cocoon way or in an outward way. And so if we think about how inward mindset transforms our conflict stories, think about inward mindset as being about self-preservation. When I'm experiencing conflict, what I'm worried about is what is happening to me, how this conflict is affecting me, what is going to be the outcome for me. And I tend to externalize the sources of my conflict outside of me with others. So others are objects to me in the sense that they are causing my conflict, and my conflict will go away when others stop causing conflict for me. And that's why this becomes such a self-absorbed and lack of accountability narrative, right? Everything is happening to me in conflict. And as a mediator, I mean, I just hear this 24/7. When people come in and tell me their stories, the use of the word me is over and over and over again. And help me change them, help them see me as a person. Our solutions to the problems exist outside of ourselves. And now if you think about how outward mindset transforms our conflict stories, everything shifts, because outward mindset is not just about self-preservation, nor is it just about other preservation. It's about us preservation. And so my conflict stories and behaviors take others into account. It's not just about how this conflict is affecting me, but also how it's affecting them, their needs, their objectives, and their challenges. And we are accountable because we now become accountable for the way that we are interacting in the conflict and how we are seeing other people when we're in conflict. And this is something I think that Arbinger folks know really well, but it's interesting how often even having an understanding and knowledge of Arbinger doesn't always protect us in those moments when we're feeling fear or in conflict with each other. And we start to actually create a false dichotomy that it's either about self-preservation or them preservation, instead of thinking about what it means to have us preservation. And a lot of that has to do with conflict styles. And so if you got the email beforehand, I know some of you were able to take a test on our Dangerous Love website, our conflict styles test. And I'm going to ask, we're going to run a poll in a few minutes that ask you what your conflict style is. I also know that some of you maybe didn't get a chance to see the link or haven't taken the test yet. And so we're going to explain a little bit what I mean about conflict styles and how I think they're related to mindset and why they can become so debilitating in conflict. And all of us have these styles. I just want to say we probably do all of these styles at some time in our life, but I find that people have often a dominant style that it's a go-to style for them. And then in particular relationships, sometimes there's a particular style in that particular relationship that we have with a partner, with a child, with a boss at work, with our coworkers, with our reports, what have you. Okay, so there's five that we're going to talk about: competing, collaborating, compromising, avoiding, accommodating. You'll see that at the top on the left axis is unassertive to assertive, and competing and collaborating being very assertive styles, avoiding and accommodating being very unassertive styles. And then you'll also see there at the bottom another axis, and that axis is cooperativeness. And so there you see uncooperative on the left, cooperative on the right. Avoiding and competing tend to be really uncooperative, and accommodating and collaborative actually tend to be pretty cooperative. So let's talk about avoidance for a minute and what that looks like. It's running, it's hiding, it's ignoring, it's pretending, or suffering in silence in the face of conflict. It's that fear, right, that conflict is going to come and consume us. And the need that it often fulfills is one of protection. And so if we see conflict as scary, this need to protect ourselves or even to protect the relationship kicks in. And it paints conflict just as generally dangerous to the relationship. And so we try to avoid it at all costs. Interestingly, this is the dominant style across genders, across ages, across ethnicities and countries. When in doubt, most people, when they're faced with conflict, are going to try to avoid it if they can. Unfortunately, there's times that we can, and that's what all the other conflict styles are for. So let's talk about accommodation for a minute. This looks like always saying yes, giving in when others push back, feeling like you won't be loved if you disagree or speak your mind. The need that it feels is to be liked, right? The thing that we want most out of the conflict is for the other person to like us, respect us, love us. And the smog view is that your needs in the conflict or in the relationship are dangerous to the relationship, right? And so I need to hide those needs or not advocate for those needs, because that is going to be the way to smooth this conflict over, to make other people happy. And as long as they're happy, I'm happy. And now look, sometimes, just like avoidance, there might be times and places for this, right? And if you're really hot and you're going to say something that you really don't mean, or that's going to be detrimental to the relationship, then it's great to avoid it for a minute. Go take a walk, sleep on it, get some perspective from other people before you jump into avoidance. But avoidance is a long-term strategy, is super detrimental to relationships and organizations and communities. Same thing goes with accommodation. Look, sometimes it's okay. If you're deciding between two movies and you don't care, and you decide, hey, I'm just going to let the other person, because they really are passionate about it, choose the movie, that's fine. But if it is something that you care about, and over again, your move is to put that aside and put the other person first, that becomes really unsustainable. And a lot of the accommodators that I work with, over time, what starts to happen is that resentment just begins to build until ultimately it just explodes. Competition is another form of conflict style, and it looks like arguing, debating, manipulating, forcing, trying to win the conflict. The need it fulfills is the need to be right in this, and it paints others' needs as dangerous to the relationship. So in other words, in this particular context, it's not my needs that are dangerous, it's theirs. And if they get what they want, how is that going to affect me? And so to protect myself and to make sure that I get everything that I need, I launch into competition and feel like, look, if my needs are really that valuable, I'll win. And if they're not, I'll lose, but I'm really going to try to win. And competition, again, there's all sorts of times that it's appropriate to advocate for our needs, to even debate or to have conversations, or to talk about the merits of different concepts and ideas. A lot of times in organizations, it's really encouraged that everybody brings their ideas and really strongly advocates for them. The problem is, as a long-term solution, again, if I'm always trying to win the relationship, whether that's at home or at work or whatever, that means that there's also going to be someone who's constantly losing in the relationship. And the damage that that does to relationships, both at work, at home, and our communities, is pretty bad. And then there's compromise. And now most people say, oh, okay, compromise. This is where we should go. And that's splitting the difference, dealing, giving up things you want to get things that other people, that giving up things that you want to get things that you want. The need is often fairness. My kids are huge on this as a conflict style, right? Everything needs to be fair. Everything needs to be equal. And there's this view that we both need to win and lose to get a fair outcome. But research shows that compromise actually may be the laziest and worst of the conflict styles, in part because while it gives the appearance of fairness, most people's perception after a compromise is to walk away and remember what they did not get out of the conflict. They immediately forget what they did get and what they won. And they immediately start thinking about why they didn't get those other things and the resentment that builds and what have you. And for many people, this is like, okay, I'm splitting the difference. This is going to be fair. But it typically doesn't really work out that way. And as a mediator, this is a ton of our work and problem solving, is to try to get people to avoid compromise and do this next step, which is called collaboration. And Arbinger is a great language for collaboration because it's valuing the needs of both yourself and others. It engages in creative problem solving, willingness to engage even when you don't agree. And the need it fulfills is to be in relationship. In other words, us preservation trumps self-preservation or other preservation. And there's this belief, and it's a cocoon view, that we can solve problems together that meet both of our needs. The outward mindset model is a collaboration model. It's really about trying to understand what other people's needs, wants, and desires are, and then how do we work together as an organization or as partners or what have you to both meet those needs as well as have my needs met as well. It also just turns out that collaboration is the hardest style. We don't often teach this in schools or to our kids. People often really struggle to actually engage in this. And even when they try, they end up reverting back to competition or accommodation or what have you. Collaboration is really hard. And so I want to take a second. We're going to pull up a poll here. And I want to see what your conflict styles are. If you took the test, that's great. Put down whatever the test told you. If you didn't take the test, but you've seen enough in this presentation to make a guess, let's see what you got. Okay, we'll give you a few more seconds on the poll. Okay. Well, you can tell this is an Arbinger group. Look at that. Collaboration wins the day, 31%. That's extremely rare. In most of the situations that I work in, it's the lowest number, not the highest number. But then you see, fairly equal numbers there between avoidance and compromise. It looks like competition is the lowest number here. That's really interesting. Typically Americans, and I'm assuming probably most of the people on ours are Americans, actually have the highest rate of competition of any group that's out there. Okay, good. 31% of us, collaboration is our dominant style. And when I say dominant style, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's our only style. And again, look, all conflict styles can be useful in a moment, but if you need to solve insurmountable or difficult conflict, collaboration is really the only style that's going to work. And so if you think about the outward mindset and inward mindset diagrams, I focus on us preservation. That really looks like collaboration, right? I'm looking at people's outside triangles. I'm really trying to understand what their needs, wants, and desires are. And then if you transition over to inward mindset, you can see avoiding, accommodating, and competing all inward focused, right? I avoid the conflict because I'm afraid of the conflict. I'm accommodating because I'm afraid that my needs will ruin the relationship and I just really want to feel loved or liked. And again, that's inward. Or competing, I really just feel that I need to win this situation. And so really it's all about me. And then if you remember this diagram on the right here, now the arrows are pointed outward, right? This is not on the right, the outward mindset diagram, but it's often a false one where we think that we're outward, but we're still inward. In compromise, the focus still primarily is on getting what I want, out of the conflict and giving up a few things so that I get what I want out of the conflict. And that's different than collaboration, right? Collaboration is really becoming invested in what other people need and how do I meet those needs while still holding on to the things that I need and want as well. And often I think this is where people think they're compromising and they're doing it and they're being outward, when really it's still primarily an inward way of sort of thinking or working together. And so let me tell you how this worked with Miriam and Mahmoud for a minute. She decided that what they were going to do was they were going to offer to clean Mahmoud's gym every night for free. They were very excited about this. They left. I told them to email me, keep in touch and what have you. A couple of weeks later, Miriam emails back, it's going so great. Mahmoud said yes. He's allowing us to clean our gym. It's really, really going great. Can I ask him yet to use the gym? And I responded back, do you think that you're outward yet? Do you think that you're seeing him as a person? Her answer was, I don't really know. And then my response back was, well, I think that that's probably telling you everything that you need to know. Keep cleaning the gym. They keep cleaning the gym for a couple of more weeks. She emails back again. It's going really great. Mahmoud's actually talking to us at night. At times he brings us tea. We're starting to build somewhat of a relationship with him. And he invited us over for dinner. Okay, I think he sees us as people now. Can we ask him to use the gym? And I think this was an interesting moment for Miriam with a recognition about what may have actually been going on here early on, right, in conflict, that what I'm really trying to do, and I think a lot of us are guilty of this, is trying to get them to see me as a person, to get them outward towards me. And if they're outward towards me, the conflict is solved. But that didn't necessarily mean that Miriam was outward towards Mahmoud, right? Just cleaning the gym, I can do that in one of two ways. I think it was really clear which way Miriam was probably doing it. And so the response back again is, Miriam, are you out? Are you outward yet towards Mahmoud? I don't know. Don't ask in the dinner. Just go to the dinner. Learn more about Mahmoud and be patient. They go to the dinner, they meet Mahmoud's wife, and there they discover something, a picture on a mantelpiece of a daughter that they did not know that Mahmoud had. They asked the wife about it, and I have to be a little bit careful here about telling every detail of the story, but eventually they find out at the dinner that Mahmoud is estranged from his daughter, that he blames himself and the gym that he created for that estrangement, that they hadn't spoken in a number of years, and because of that breakdown in relationship, he vowed that he was never going to allow women to work in the gym or to use the gym again. And as Miriam is emailing me and telling me all this, she ends the conversation in the best of ways. She said, don't worry, I'm not going to ask him to use the gym. I just want to help, and I think I know how. Over the next few weeks, Miriam collaborated with Mahmoud's wife to get him back in touch with his daughter, to facilitate some reconciliation between the two. And after several weeks of working through this, Mahmoud and his daughter reconciled. And without Miriam even asking, this evil, sexist, old, impossible gym owner approached Miriam and asked her and her group whether they would like to use the gym, and their nonprofit took off. Now, if you would have asked Miriam 2 months before whether the conflict was solvable, her answer would be absolutely not. There's no way. Mahmoud will never turn. And then in the process of working through this, every effort was really about trying to get Mahmoud to turn towards her. But when she finally turned towards Mahmoud, that became the invitational space for Mahmoud to turn. And so in Arbinger, we talk about this as the most important move, turning first. And I want to talk just in our last couple of minutes, because I see that, man, I'm already over time. I just want to talk in the last minutes about why I think that this requires something, a term we don't often use in Arbinger, called love. Because it is really, really challenging to do this in our hardest of conflicts. And so Easy love is that we want to live and work with people that love us, that we like, that are fun to be around, that understand our brilliance, that agree with our ideas and dreams, that see us as people, that help us on our journey to become the incredible individuals we ultimately know we can be. We want that sort of love. That's easy for us. But when love isn't easy, when we don't like them, when they don't get us, when they don't agree with our ideas or dreams, they see us as objects and get in the way of our journey. Easy love makes a run for it. And that's when conflict gets scary. When we feel like people don't see us, conflict feels dangerous. And the more dangerous it feels, the worse we are in conflict, and we know it. And we let that fear take over. And at the moment when we need to connect to people the most, we actually disconnect physically, emotionally from the people that we need to be connected to at most. And our vision narrows, and our ability to actually collaboratively resolve disputes diminish dramatically. So what if we could see people and conflict in a way that allowed us to love them through conflict? And I want to use this word love, and I know it's not a popular word, especially in organizations and business, to talk about love. And it's in part because I think that the word love is often used in a lot of ways that I'm not meaning it here, because unfortunately in English, there's really just one word that love that means many things. So I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm not talking about the word that means like we love chocolate, or we love our friends because they're so fun to hang out with, or I loved that movie. I'm talking about a love that allows us to see the humanity of another person so clearly that their needs and desires matter as much to me as my own. That's the sort of love that illuminates the path to conflict and conflict transformation, because when that takes hold, not only do we not see others as enemies, we see us. And it takes that level of care and concern towards the people we are in conflict with to truly solve the most difficult, intractable challenges that we face in life. I'm not sure that just seeing them as people is enough. There has to be a caring and concern about their outcomes as well as our own, to really get through the intractable conflict that we face in our lives. And so why do I call it dangerous love? It's because we're choosing love over fear in the face of conflict. It's choosing we over me. Dangerous love transcends that fear. It transforms conflict by calling on us to let go of our self-concern. What will happen to me if I let down my walls and help this person I'm in conflict with, and embrace us concern? What will happen to us if we don't? And while many people hear that word and they think, okay, that's soft, I actually think it is the most courageous, brave, vulnerable, and hardest thing that we ever have to do in life, to embrace our enemies, to constantly push forward, to be able to see the people that we disagree with or that are in our way as people, and commit to rolling up our sleeves and working through the process to find a solution that works for both them and us. So it calls us on us to be vulnerable, to open ourselves up with no guarantee that they're going to turn. It's not safe, it's not guaranteed, but when we do it, and I think this was the point, when Miriam turned and let go of being able to run the workshop anymore, right? Or to be able to run the gym anymore. And she let go of her group coming into the gym and just worked on being helpful to Mahmoud. It came, right? And that to me was remarkable. The love that she ultimately felt for Mahmoud, for his family, for everyone else is what actually transforms the relationship and actually creates that space for Mahmoud to turn. And that is the most dangerous move. It's not just turning towards the other person, but turning in a space of vulnerability, turning in a space of compassion, and opening ourselves up to hearing and listening to people that don't see us, that don't disagree with us, that do disagree with us, until our desire is to be as helpful to them as if it was easy love. And that becomes the invitational space for other people to turn. And so I'm out of time, but I just want to give you a second to say, if you're interested at all in this concept or want to learn more, my book Dangerous Love is coming out on June 23rd. You can actually pre-order it right now. And actually this week, I've been working for many years with Peace Players International, an organization that has used Arbinger concepts to bring together people in the Middle East, in Northern Ireland, South Africa, what have you. They've been really hit hard by COVID-19 from a financial standpoint. I'm donating all of my proceeds to the book this week to Peace Players. So if you go to dangerouslovebook.com and pre-order there, all those proceeds will go to Peace Players. And we've got some cool things online, Instagram, Facebook at Dangerous Love Book. We have a really cool Dangerous Love community on Facebook where we're constantly working on and looking at issues around this. And there's a cool Dangerous Love podcast. If you search iTunes or Spotify or whatever, Dangerous Love podcast, Mitch Warner is going to be one of our guests here in a couple of weeks on our Dangerous Love podcast. And I'm really excited to be able to continue to engage you on all of that stuff at Dangerous Love. And I think that's it. Aloha.
Chad, thank you so much. Fantastic presentation. I know you said you went over, but I can tell you the chat was saying, keep going, keep talking, keep talking. I thought those brain scans were fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing. And I can say I think your podcast is awesome. And personally, I'm really looking forward to that book that's coming out in June. Thank you to everybody who took the time to be with us here on the webinar. Chad mentioned, and I mentioned a little earlier, he and I are going to be recording a Q&A session where we answer a lot of your questions. You have just about a minute more to drop any questions you have additionally in the Q&A right at that button at the bottom of your screen. We got a lot already. If you have more, be sure to put them in so you don't miss out on that opportunity to get your questions to Chad. That's recorded separately and will be hosted on arbinger.com/webinars. So keep an eye on that page for Chad's conversation to be posted. You'll also be able to participate and watch all the other webinars and Q&As that we've held so far. They've all been great, I can say. Reminder, this presentation has been recorded and will be sent to you via email. It also is going to live on our YouTube channel, so head over to YouTube and subscribe, and you'll see right away when the video is posted. And while you're there, we also have a great additional video from Chad that he recorded with us back in a million years ago when the travel restrictions weren't in place, where he sat down and he talked about more about conflict and mediation, which he's clearly an expert in. That video is called Critical Advice from Conflict and Mediation with expert Chad Ford. Chad also shared with you the many ways you can connect with him and keep track of his progress on toward the release of Dangerous Love, the book. I encourage you to interact with him there. Follow him on Instagram and LinkedIn and all the places that he shared. I don't know, Chad, if you have a specific LinkedIn page for the book, but I know Chad personally has a LinkedIn page, so go ahead and you can connect with him there. I know, again, with all the travel restrictions, that keeping up that communication around the book looks a little different than it normally would during a book tour and book promotion. So Chad's been sharing a lot of awesome content on his website, on his social media, as well as his podcast. So connect with him there. And while you're on these platforms, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc., be sure to connect with Arbinger as well. We also love to share a lot of great content there. So keep your eye on your inbox for the link to this recording. Be sure to head back to arbinger.com/webinars to find the conversation that I'll have with Chad just after this, answering your questions. Whether you've been live with us on Zoom, whether you're watching on YouTube or checking out a recording of this later, I'm Sarah McMullen with the Arbinger Institute. It's been so lovely to have you here, and thanks for joining us.